Look at us. We're live, you guys. Kyle and Terry, welcome. As people start filling the room, give them give a minute for YouTube to catch up. Glad that everybody is here and able to join us. We've got quite an outline today. As always, for those joining us in the live stream, we encourage you to ask questions. You're watching this on YouTube, you can just type right into the question box, and it will come to us live as we are doing this show, and we'll take your questions at the end. So, be patient and stick around. We do our best to keep this right at a half hour. So if you're taking a half hour lunch, this is perfect. We are great lunch partners.
We are.
Why didn't we bring lunch?
I don't know.
We actually should have brought lunch.
Yeah.
We really should have.
All right. We are going to begin proper. Welcome and thank you. Welcome to Human Solutions, simplifying HR for people who love HR from AIM HR Solutions on True Story FM. I'm Pete Wright. We are glad you are here. Today, we're talking about AI in HR, what it's doing well, where it's going off the rails, and why the smartest companies are figuring out their AI policies now, not after the headlines hit. From performance reviews drafted by ChatGPT to job postings fine-tuned in seconds, AI is very much shaping the way HR teams work. But what happens when the chatbot gives bad advice or an algorithm bakes bias into your hiring process? Joining me today, once again, are our own Kyle Pardo and Terry Cook. They are watching firsthand how AI tools are showing up in everyday HR workflows. And they're here to unpack the legal, ethical, and don't try this at home side of AI adoption. Together, we're going to dig into the good, the bad, and the real-world steps you can take to make the AI help, not a hazard at work. All right, Terry, Kyle, welcome back. We have a minefield of a conversation today, I fear.
Absolutely.
How are you both using AI? Just in terms of a table setting, how are you using AI day to day? Do you find that you have a persistent AI chat companion, Kyle?
I think all the time, using AI a lot. But I'm trying to put it into three buckets. When to use it, when to be cautious, and when to stay away.
Okay.
So if I think of it, if I'm going to put together an onboarding program, I'm absolutely going to use AI to help me create an onboarding checklist. Help me think about what I should put into my onboarding plan, talk about benefits, welcome employees, day-to-day things going on in the office. I'm going to put that into AI. I'm going to ask it to help me create a checklist.
Sure.
The area where I'd say, I don't know if it's going to work or not, I'd be cautious about using it to explain employee benefits, for example, because I want to really make sure it's going to give me the right information. And it might give me some good information, but I'm going to be cautious. I'm not going to use it for the personal touch. I still, want the human and human resources. I want to give the employee a tour. I want to take them to lunch. I want to tell them about the company culture. So, I kind of think of it in those three buckets of, absolutely use it for the checklist, but think about it how you're going to use it otherwise.
I think that's a really good perspective. It is HR. It's not AIR. And I think there are very real concerns from AR pros. Oh, we're in trouble. From HR pros who are looking at what many small to mid-sized businesses are doing and thinking, well, maybe we can outsource a lot of our HR process to AI. And I think I can safely say the reality is, from our perspective, be very careful. There be monsters.
Yeah.
Terry, how are you using AI?
I think similar to Kyle, I think anytime I'm thinking about something that I might be creating, trying to look into something that I might be working on, and I get stuck with words and I'll say, gosh, I feel like I'm not saying this right. I'll tend to look to the AI and say, here's what I'm trying to say. Here's my information. Help me say it differently. And then tweak it from there. I find it extremely useful to do things like that. Like Kyle, I'm always careful about some things. Like, I work a lot with compliance. So I would say compliance is an area where AI cannot always be trusted. So you can tell it to do something and it comes back with the wrong answer. And sometimes it'll be me just trying to test it to say, tell me this, and then it comes back and it's not the correct answer. So I'm always very cautious. And again, also agreeing with Kyle, when you're trying to talk to somebody or trying to do something with an interaction with a person, you don't want to sound like a robot. You don't want to sound like a computer. You want to sound like you, and you want to sound like you're trying to develop a rapport. So I would say that's how I use it and don't use it.
I was going to just add to that too, Pete. I mean, one of the ways that I'm using it is for performance reviews. You know, the studies show that people write performance reviews just based off of the past 3 months, just because you forget what happened earlier in the year. So I use it. I take notes throughout the year when I have a conversation with my employees, what's going well, what's not going well, what projects they're working on, things like that. And then at the end of the year, put those notes into AI, not using individual names, not using company names, client names, keeping all of that out of it. So it's kind of a generic information, but asking AI to help consolidate and summarize that information for me. But absolutely has to be the human delivering the review, putting the personal touch on it, putting specific examples in there, things like that. So again, AI is going to be helpful, but not to rely on it exclusively, because you need to have that human conversation giving feedback.
Before we started the conversation today, I gave you both an acronym that I believe was new to you, and you very falsely gave me credit for it because it's a ridiculous acronym, but I think it's important. It's HITL, HITL, Human in the Loop. And I think that comes into this conversation in probably every point that we're making, right? Kyle, your example about performance reviews, you are absolutely in the loop, and you have the original notes that you can skim and make sure that all the points are accurate to your experience with that employee. Where else do you find those sort of day-to-day support tasks, the day-to-day sort of tool come into play where you find a good balance between your own sort of cognitive mastery and the AI?
I think training programs, we do a lot of in-person training or virtual but instructor-led training. You can use AI to do training, you can use e-learning to do training, but it doesn't have the human touch of answering questions and using personal examples and getting conversation amongst participants. And so I think just when you think about any of these ways to use AI, that human touch adds another layer to it. So it doesn't mean you can't use e-learning. E-learning is great and it has a certain purpose, but the human touch adds that next layer to really, make it personal to the people in the course.
Are you doing things like job postings, offer letters? Are you doing some of those more quotidian tasks with AI? Are you seeing that happen a lot?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Terry answer that. She manages our recruiting function, and absolutely.
Sure. I would say definitely for job postings. I think too many people try to work too hard to make a job posting when you can really just start it up with AI. As Kyle mentioned, you take your own information for the job posting, plug it in so that without personal company information, and then just let it start to generating that job posting. And then you're dealing with more tweaking, adjustments for job postings versus somebody that might spend hours in front of a computer trying to go line by line through a job posting. So I think definitely for job postings, I've used it. Even job descriptions, there's portions of that you can do as a general use for AI and then add your own specifics to. But it is about putting the right information in to AI to get the best result that you can at least use to tweak. I think that's the important part. If you're very generic and say, can you create a job posting? Sure it can. It doesn't have any clue what it's doing, but it will create something.
Oh, it'll create something. Yeah.
It'll create something. But then the more you kind of dive into it and like Kyle said, putting your own information in there so that you can tell it what you're really looking for, then you get the good results. And it's definitely a time saver.
I think we're seeing HR people also use it even for kind of, I'm going to say some company policies, meaning that if you want to write a dress code policy, you might want to put information in there and say, here's our company culture, help me create a policy for casual Friday. We don't allow, jean shorts, but we do allow this. You might get a really good policy. But be really careful if you're going to use it to create a, earn sick time policy or something like that. That's really compliance based, and those are the types of policies you want to have really vetted or done by a professional. But to do a dress code policy, sure, it's going to give you some really good information.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that's really important. And I also like the approach that both of you are discussing, right? Because there's one thing where you type in, hey, create a dress code policy. It'll create a dress code policy. I would just like to offer for those who are exploring with it to remember that you can talk to it like it is a brainstorming partner.
Yeah.
After it gives you a policy, say, look, that doesn't quite work. Now I want you to make sure you include something about jean shorts, and I want you to include something about, funny hats, and I want you to include something about open-toed shoes.
Yeah.
And then it'll give you a revision, and now you get to read that, and you get to
Yeah.
identify that. It does sort of offer an interesting conundrum. How do you verify all of this AI-generated content without spending the same amount of time that you'd spend writing it yourself? Do you both run into that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if it's compliance related, really taking a look, and Terry was talking about this earlier, of looking at the source. And, we would typically, if we were going to write a policy, we would spend a lot of time looking at the Department of Labor's website. We would spend a lot of time looking at the Massachusetts.gov website, really looking at the official sources. So when you start to see things that are pulled from, different blog postings or, other resources, it's something to consider. I heard somebody explain AI as really being like an intern. And so an intern starts, they really don't know a lot. You have to take some time. They might come with a first draft and you say, well, that's pretty good, but next time I might add something else into it. And then, as you said, Pete, it really becomes an iterative process where you're going back and forth with an intern and in teaching them. And at some point they're going to get better and better, but still not going to be quite the level of the department director or, who's going to customize it for the company.
Right.
And that intern keeps going and getting a new job. So you have to get a new intern and constantly be testing almost every time you use it.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, interns, slow your roll.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk then about, we know AI can save time, but let's talk about where it has gone wrong, particularly in HR, right? We want to throw up some red flags of experiences that we've come across that indicate AI can be truly troublesome. The chatbot sort of initiatives. Kyle, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So again, a chatbot is another intern, right? And so it is going to gather information possibly from your website, possibly pulling it from other sites. So you can tell AI, I want you to look at this document. And so let's say you want to use AI to help summarize your employee benefits. You could put in the summary plan description, which is a really long, detailed document that we all get with our health insurance that explains what's covered and what's not covered. And typically nobody reads this full document until you need it. And then you feverishly look through it to see what's covered or not. So you could upload that to AI and say, help summarize this for me. But again, we're going to keep talking about this caution. If I'm looking to see if a chiropractor is covered or if some type of medication is covered or something, I'd be really careful in terms of what AI is telling me. And I'd probably want to double check that with the insurance company, or I'd want to go back and look in the document myself to see if I could find it actually written in the document. Because if I go ahead and I have surgery, assuming it's going to be covered and then find out it's not, and I think, I based my decision on what the AI search told me, that would be a challenging situation. So something like that, I would really probably want to try to verify the information I'm getting back.
Terry, I have a note here that you specifically want to talk about an Amazon AI recruiting scandal.
Oh, it was some time ago, but I think it applies. I've read other cases since. But essentially, if somebody's looking at what can be a good employee for me, you can talk to ChatGPT, or you can talk to AI in general about it. And sometimes it'll say, well, show us what your current, your current employees are your best guess of what a future employee might look like. So in this particular case, they showed AI all of their current employees who happened to have been male. And so anytime AI started looking at future resumes, the company was thinking they would pull like experience, things like that. But because they were male, anything that had any relationship, mention of women, women's college, women's activities, women's groups, it was automatically eliminating the women from that grouping. And again, certainly inadvertent. It wasn't like Amazon was telling it, please don't show me any female applicants. But I mean, it's happened a lot. I have heard a lot of cases. I went through a diversity recruiting program, and they just said that you as a person can inadvertently teach AI the wrong things. You're not going to try to be biased, But if you tell AI, here's the type of candidates that look like the right candidates for our company, they're going to take that literally. And they're going to look at those candidates and think that they have to compare any future applicants to the candidate. So again, is it an example where a company wants to do something wrong? Of course not. They're just inadvertently happening because AI is reading into it the wrong way.
Because your intern is incredibly impressionable.
That's
and
right.
also
There you
quite
go.
sycophantic. And it
Yeah.
will tell you you're right and so wise, Terry.
Oh, sure.
All the
Yeah,
time.
wow.
Your
That
this
just
policy
happens, Pete.
it's the best policy
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
ever seen.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can we do a quick sidebar on specific tools? We're using AI in kind of a generic capacity right now.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about the big tools because they all have different sort of strengths. Do you
Sure.
what do you guys use right now? And what do you like about it? Terry, you want to start?
I find myself going towards ChatGPT a lot. I mean, it just seems like it's something maybe I'm getting comfortable with. Certainly, there's others. I know Claude, I've used that on occasion. There's one that's escaping me that I've used in training before that was pretty reliable to help me start generating training programs. But I think probably because of, again, comfort level, I tend to go right back to ChatGPT. I don't know about you, Kyle.
Yeah, the same too. And then the third one I would add is Gamma, which I've used for presentations. And
Okay.
so it can take an outline, which maybe create the outline in ChatGPT, and then taking that outline and put it in Gamma, and it's created a really nice presentation, which then you can customize with your own company colors and logo and all those types of things.
Sure.
But it'll help create images on there, and kind of give you something pretty quickly that you can use.
Okay, so ChatGPT is from OpenAI, the company OpenAI, and it is available at chatgpt.com as we record this. I mean, 2 days ago, they released the latest iteration of their model, ChatGPT 5. Ergo, if you should be testing it around the things that you used to use with ChatGPT 4 because it's different. It does things different. It thinks. I'm saying that in heavy air quotes. It thinks differently. The other that Terry mentioned is Anthropic's Claude. Claude, it tends to have, I think it's regarded in the AI industry as having stronger guardrails around sort of what it can do and what it will do, where some of the other players don't necessarily. It's also a bit of a scrappy upstart. I think people who use it, what I hear all the time is you run into limits faster than you do with some of the other tools. So Claude is a really good tool, and it has some capacity issues. The other that I'm surprised neither of you have run into is Google Gemini. Google's Gemini is an incredibly powerful tool, and it is baked into one of the best tools for a specific purpose that I've run into, and that is Google's Notebook LM. Have either of you heard of Notebook LM?
We have. I don't want it to put you out of business, Pete, but we've tried to play with it, and it can create a podcast, and you hear two people talking. It's amazing. Definitely not as good as this, but it's interesting.
The fact that you can hear two people breathing and thinking and making mouth noises is unsettling for a guy like me. But yes, it's true. You can. The reason I want to bring it up is because we talk about using AI on your own data, and Google Notebook LM is an incredible tool for this. So imagine you take all of your policy documents, right? And you take that text and you put them in as resources in Google Notebook LM. You can then effectively interrogate, just with the Gemini chatbot, interrogate those policies. And every response it gives you has a little link back to exactly where it found that information. That sort of recursive nature of being able to effectively interview your policies is incredibly powerful when you're dealing with long documents or sets of documents. You can put up to 300 separate documents in an individual chat with Google Notebook LM and get and have just a fantastic hyper centralized brain of your policies that can be very, very useful. Very early days for this, but you can imagine as Copilot from Microsoft, and that increasingly invested in SharePoint, all of these repositories become just incredibly accessible to a degree that we haven't had before, all because of these LLMs.
Yeah.
So those are
Yeah.
big three. I think Perplexity is another one that is that has some baggage to it, but it's another one that offers great retraceability of steps. All of the models now, effective this week, now do web search. So when you do a search in Claude and ChatGPT 5, you can tell it, like, make sure to search the web for these resources, and it will tell you the sources it found. Do that. Make sure you do that if you are listening. If you're just relying on text and not looking at resources, you are not HITL. You are not the HITL. Okay. I think, Kyle, did you want to say something?
No, I was just saying, as we're talking about this, one of the things Terry and I have been talking more about with AI too are the potential scams and the challenges for HR people, because we deal with so much confidential information. And, we hear more and more stories of, I don't know how many people have seen like emails coming out about with like direct deposit requests. And, and you're not really sure if it's from the employee or not. And you're trying to figure out, are they looking to change their banking information? But we're also seeing where kind of the future of, it looks like you're interviewing somebody, but it's not a real person.
It's not a person. Yeah.
It's not a person at all. And so, will companies go back to in-person interviews just to verify that you're getting a real answer from a real person? So I think those are the types of things as an HR person that, we don't know what that's going to look like in the future, but I imagine we'll have to put some more safeguards around some of those processes.
Well, and that's where I want to go for our sort of final segment today, which is around those guardrails. With all of these new tools, what are you seeing in terms of formal AI policies, and what should they include? Kyle, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I think it's going to be a policy that you're going to have to keep reviewing. This is not going to be put it in your handbook and leave it and check it in 5 years, because we just don't know what it's going to look like with AI. So I'd put this on your system, review it every 6 months and see if it still makes sense. But I think companies are going to have to put some policy together in terms of confidential information. What are the safeguards, and what, can you put a search in there with client information or employee information, or, is that prohibited? So I think companies should be thinking about that. I think what to do if your company does get involved in a scam or somebody's information is jeopardized, making sure you have good, and that's, kind of data privacy. Companies should have that information anyway, but should really kind of make sure that's wrapped up in their AI policy. Terry probably has more to add to that, though.
No, I think you're right. I think it's about the security. So it's security of confidential information. It's letting people know how and when to use it. So there should be some kind of a structure or guideline from the company. Definitely not only just the policy, but the follow-up and the training. I find a lot of people misunderstand how reliable something might be and might not be. So they might not be aware of the caution areas, but saying it to the other way, they don't realize how they can use it to make life easier either. So I think it's about not only just having the policy, but I do agree with Kyle, having a policy, being very clear on what the company expects you to do to protect information, when you're allowed to use it, when you have to check before you put some information into ChatGPT or an AI format to make sure that it's okay to do. I think all of those things are going to be important. And as Kyle said, with more and more scams coming up, just really being aware that you may have to keep adding to that policy and changing it. And again, with that training and discussions, communication, again, not computer, people, talking to people to explain like what can happen and what's safe and what's not safe.
I want to talk just briefly about culture and technical culture at work, because I feel like we have two ends of this spectrum, and one exists with teams that are anxious or skeptical about using AI tools, refuse to use it, don't want to get involved with AI, tend to be sort of paralyzed around the conversation at the extreme. And the other is the side that says, okay, look, I was a bring my device to work guy. Like, I brought my iPhone to work in 2007 when my company was making me use, Blackberries, because I like the newest, latest stuff. And our AI policy is too restrictive. It's not allowing me to get my work done. So I'm going to be here on my personal device using AI for company stuff. Right? Both of those things have different sets of risks. And I would love it if you would comment on how to approach teams that way. And it might involve talking to IT, right? And making some policy choices. How do you do that? Who would like to take the skeptical employee angle?
Terry, you're a go skeptical employee.
I love how you lob that one over here, right? But no, I agree with you. I think it is about a matter of letting people know what they can and can't use. So it is IT getting involved, to the person like Pete who decides to use his own equipment.
That was a total hypothetical, Terry.
Oh,
I'm feeling a little bit targeted.
Never, Pete. I would never do that. But no, I do think that that's true. And some of that is, companies don't want company private information being put on personal equipment. And again, to your point, Pete, that's got to be clear. I mean, because not everybody would see that, using your example that you said, somebody has a preference of what they want to use. And even if it isn't the BlackBerries from years ago, there are people that are like, I only want Apple, I only want Android. There's always people that have preferences and what they're comfortable with. But again, having that information, private company information, being transferred over to a personal device can be a problem. And it needs to be specific in a policy from IT, from HR, these are the areas that could be a problem by using personal equipment.
Okay, Kyle, other side. I think Terry just addressed the non-skeptical employee side, but the Pete side, we'll just call it the Pete side. So I guess, Kyle, you get the de facto skeptical employee side who's afraid to use AI.
So I think people are afraid to use AI because they're afraid that their job is going to go away, right? We hear that a lot. And I'm going to go back to your new acronym of, keeping the human in the loop, because if we can get all of those day-to-day, mundane activities off of our plate, writing letters or creating forms or doing some research or things like that, if we can get that off our plate, as HR professionals, we can get the human back into the work that we got into in the first place. So we have the time then to take the new employee out to lunch. We have the time to plan, a town hall with the CEO and have a company get together just to talk in person. And so very often those things get pushed aside because we have to do those day-to-day kind of tasks. So I think the people who are afraid of it, kind of thinking about like, how can we embrace this? And it is super exciting, and but get those things off our plate so we can do the human touch pieces.
Sure.
A lot of times it's just about, it was a very good answer, Kyle, but it is all about educating them, because I think it's either fear because it's the fear of the unknown, or it's fear of what Kyle's saying. They're fearful that they're going to be replaced, or something's not going to be needed anymore because they're going to be able to show that somebody else can do what they're doing. So I think it is addressing both sides.
I think so too. I think that figuring out where that happy sort of middle ground does involve IT coming up with a policy, compliance coming up with a partner policy, all of these bodies coming together to say, look, we're going to give you enough that you can do the work without being overly restrictive, as long as you meet us in that middle ground too, and not start using your own stuff and putting company confidential information into public AIs. We can meet in the middle, and I would say, as a corollary to the skeptical employee, it's okay to be skeptical. Part of the fear is just not knowing what questions to ask. Right. I don't know which parts of my job I can streamline, so I'd rather just not think about it. And I think that's okay. It's okay. Yeah. You can get to the point where you'll figure out what questions to ask. It's not. I think, in spite of what some technological skeptics are saying, it's not going away. No. It's not going away. It's here. So
and letting them know who to ask. I think to your point, right, Pete? A lot of people might say, "Well, I don't know. Is that my supervisor that I have to ask that? Is that HR? Is that IT?" So really, give people directions going to be important. Yeah,
huge. What is AIM working on? Any sort of courseware? Any sort of complementary resources to put together for folks that we can share?
Sure. So we, part of our handbook subscription, we do have a recently released AI policy. So that is something that goes out to people who are looking to update their handbooks and keep it updated. And as I said earlier, probably one that will continue to update as we learn more about AI. So you'll see that change. And I think you're going to start to see it woven into more and more of our training classes. So, how does, and not just like maybe just a standalone class, but really into the day-to-day HR activities. And so I think it's something that we'll all be feeling going forward. We talked about, what will this conversation look like in 6 months? Will we be on to some other new platform? But you'll start to see that woven into more and more of our programs that we offer.
Excellent. Well, I think this is a great conversation. I think you acquitted yourselves perfectly, and I don't at all believe that you are AI bots having this conversation with me. I am gratified to say that. Thank you, everybody, for downloading or for being a part of this live stream. However you came across us, we're glad you're here. We hope this gives you some insights and some resources. Make sure to swipe up, check your notes. That's where you'll find links to the handbook subscription that Kyle mentioned, and we will keep you updated. You can listen to the show if you missed the live stream. Hopefully you're subscribed to the Human Solutions podcast, available wherever your podcasts are. That's where we put the archives of these in a easy to digest, easy to drive or carpool audio format. We'd love you to check that out too. On behalf of Kyle Pardo and Terry Cook, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next time right here on Human Solutions.